All right, we'll just give it a minute here as participants start to come in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to P&P Live. My name is Heidi, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at Politics and Prose, and I have the pleasure of hosting our event this evening. Thank you for joining us and tuning into this format where we continue to bring authors and new books to you. I am pleased to welcome our guests this evening, Renee, Jain, and Dr. Shefali Tsabary. If you'd like to buy an additional copy of their book, Superpowered, Transform Anxiety into Courage, Confidence, and Resilience, we will drop the link into the chat. Signed book plates are available. If you have a question for our guests, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. At the end of the chat, our guests will have time to answer some of your questions. You can also vote on questions you like and want most answered. Now on to the event you're waiting for. Renee Jain is the founder of Go Zen and is recognized as a pioneer in the fields of technology and child psychology. Through her writing, product invention and development, master classes for parents, and advocacy for children, she works to build the emotional intelligence of kids. She holds a master's degree in psychology and has 2 children. Dr. Shefali Tsabary is a world-renowned clinical psychologist who received her doctorate from Columbia University. She specializes in the integration of Eastern philosophy and Western psychology, making her an expert in her field. She's a frequent keynote speaker who presents at conferences, workshops, and educational and transformational centers around the world. She is raising a teenage daughter. And now I turn the event over to them.
Hi, everyone. We're so happy you're here and we get to talk about the book. Thank you, Politics and Prose, for being such a wonderful resource in your community and for hosting us. So my dear friend Renee, Jain, and I, we co-authored this book called Superpowered. Yay. Because we realized even pre-pandemic how children were suffering from anxiety and parents and caregivers were not addressing it and didn't know how to deal with it. And Renee is a master at helping children really understand how to become their own autonomous leaders of their inner worlds. So Renee is going to introduce the main premise of this book and tell us why this is such a paradigm shifter.
Yeah, so the premise of this book, when we were approached by a publisher to write on anxiety, they really wanted us to write about getting rid of anxiety. How do we help these 1 in 3 children that are diagnosed by the age of 18 with an anxiety disorder? How do we help them get rid of it? How do we just help them get rid of the worry? And Dr. Shefali and I got together and we said, our approach is different. We don't want to get rid of, we don't want to get rid of part of who we are. We want to help kids transform it. And so really why there is a huge paradigm shift in this book is not a fix-it book. You don't pick up Superpowered to fix your worry, to fix your anxiety, to fix what's wrong with you. This book is here to first and foremost remind you that you have a wellspring of resilience and strengths within you. And we walk kids through uncovering those strengths that they have. And then we help them see it's not that you need to get rid of your worry, it's that you need to radically change your relationship with it. It's not that we need to get rid of and you can replace that with any emotion. Our anger, our guilt, our sadness, our negativity, all of these serve a purpose. All of these feelings have a purpose and they send us messages. And those messages can be extremely important and relevant in our life. So we want kids to understand, 1, if you worry, there's nothing wrong with you. And 2, all you need to do is begin to work on your relationship with worry. So that's the real shift in this book.
Yeah. And I love how we emphasize over and over again and teach parents really indirectly in this book that validate your kids' emotions, give it space. You don't have to indulge it or keep talking about it, but you have to first allow it in. And typically, I work with so many parents who their first, and we grew up with South Asian parents, even though they loved us, their first reaction to worry was either get rid of it or stop it or go eat ice cream, So
do you want a cookie? Yeah.
So it was never really handled with the legitimacy for what the worry was, and when we don't validate children, like just, and we don't have to overdo it, but just go, yeah. So if the kid goes, there's scary monsters under my bed, for them, there's scary monsters under the bed. Now we know there aren't any, but they feel that there are. So Renee, tell us, if a parent comes to you and goes, I'm at my wit's end, my 4-year-old keeps seeing scary monsters under her bed, and I keep trying to distract her. I took her to my room, but she just can't get over the scary monsters. How would Superpowered teach us to treat those?
Yeah. So first of all, as a parent myself to young children, to a 6 and a 7-year-old, I completely empathize with the parent who's trying to distract. And I am not saying, and we are not saying, that distraction doesn't have some place in the world, of feelings. Sometimes it is okay to distract our kids. However, it will never help us process what we are experiencing. Distraction just kind of puts things off. So what I would say to you as a parent is, it's not time to reassure our kids, right? Because they need to cultivate their own reassurance. It's time to create a character. It's time to personify this feeling because, as we said in the beginning, we're trying to get people to reorient their relationship, to change their relationship with anxiety. And so we use the word relationship. Now, who do we have relationships with? People. And so what we tell these 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, the book is middle grade, but it can work with kids who are very young, is create a character. They did this very well in the movie Inside Out, which was an Academy Award-winning film, right, where they personified every emotion. In Superpowered, we personify worry with a character called Wisty the Worrier. And Wisty the Worrier, sometimes she sends really useful messages and other times she doesn't. So if you have a kid who is afraid of going to sleep because they're afraid there are monsters in the closet, then I would say it's time to begin working with Wisty the Worrier, and we do this in the book. Now, Dr. Shefali, I would love to ask you, in working with so many parents over the years, why is it that we're so afraid of our kids having feelings? What does that trigger within us as a parent?
Well, I think, just to go with the scary monster analogy, it is about the unknown. And when kids have feelings, feelings are non-rational, they're non-linear, they're emotional. So we don't know where it's going to go, and that makes us uncomfortable. We don't want, also we've been raised and conditioned to make our children happy. That's the holy grail of parenting. So when we see the kid having all these feelings about things that we know are not real, it upsets us because it's uncontrolled. It's something that we can't put in a box. And we're afraid that our kids are not linear thinkers. We want them to be on the same page as reality. But we don't understand that children, for a long while, till they're 28, don't have cognitive skills. I mean, adults barely do. And they don't have the cerebral cortex fully developed, executive functioning of understanding rational thought and planning things. So when our kids forget things, or they cry uncontrollably, or they think they're monsters, we feel like we're out of control. And it really makes us feel incompetent. And then we get angry with the kid for having just normal, developmentally appropriate feelings. And in terms of the monster in the bed, or when they're not invited to a party, or they have a pimple on their cheek when they're 12 and they're so upset, all these need to be handled really in the same way, which is, allow the feeling, allow it in the room. You go, yeah, I get it. I hear you. If I was you, I would feel the same way. I understand. Tell me more. Tell me about your monsters. How many are there? If your 12-year-old is having a conniption because of a little pimple, you lean into the anxiety, even though in your head you're like, are you seriously having a problem about a pimple? But you cannot delegitimize for that person in that moment in time. It's real. Just like we want our friends to take us seriously, we have to take our kids seriously. And just in that, leaning in and allowing space, We then calm them down, and then we do what we talk about in this book. We create a character. We allow the kid to talk about yeah, so then what will happen if you go to the party with a pimple? What is the worst case scenario, right? And then we use this technique called laddering. We help them go, okay, so you don't have to go to the party with the pimple, but maybe you just go to the park with the pimple. And then we manage the child's catastrophic thinking and make it manageable for the child. There's so many ways to do that, but our main premise is that there's nothing wrong with having feelings.
Yeah, I think some parents will be listening to this and they will say, if my child comes to me with a little problem, right? If we're putting it in perspective of having a pimple and I am leaning into that, isn't that coddling them? Isn't that saying, isn't that making them less resilient because I am paying attention to every little issue that they have? What do you say to parents who believe that that might be coddling,
Yeah,
validating? Mm-hmm.
coddling parents, helicopter parents, over anxious parents, they look for the worry in the kid and they project their inner anxiety on the kid. Very different than the kid coming to you and screaming about a spider or crying about the fact that somebody was mean to them. Very different. When your kid comes to you, you have to create the space. There's a very big energetic difference now between a listening and a tuning versus rushing to fix the problem, fix in the problem, like lean in to fix the problem and to create solutions. Very different. When you lean in to fix the problem and manage the problem, now you're coddling. We're not telling you to go fix the problem. We're not telling you to go buy them pimple cream or, take them to a facialist. We're saying just allow the feeling to be handled. And when you show your kids that you're not worried about the feeling, you're like, I hear you, I get it, I understand. Let's look at this. Let's talk about what your greatest worry is. Let's talk about why you want to fit in. Let's talk about how you can belong to yourself and feel authentic to yourself. When you talk about this in a very compassionate way, you're teaching emotional literacy versus fixing the problem. See, we're not talking about fixing anything. We're talking about teaching emotional literacy. Very different.
Mm-hmm. 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 One of the things that's highlighted for me when we're talking about that is the ability to leave space for our kids. We literally need to learn to bite our tongues and allow for space. We are so quick to jump in. It is so difficult for us to listen. So, we often talk to parents and we say things like, you have to use a Jedi mind trick, right? And if you ever watch Star Wars and you watch the Jedis, they're often silent when they're listening. And even when they have the impulse to respond to their Jedi in training, they're still silent. And I think we can learn a lot from that. It takes sometimes a lifetime of practice to allow space for a person in our life to experience their own challenge and then come to their own solution to that challenge. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for that.
I love that this book really focuses on the fact that kids already have superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
And power stands for an acronym. Renee will walk us through it. But what we've really done in this abundance-based model is tell kids you don't have to do anything to get superpowered. You're already superpowered. You've just been messed up by culture, and all adults have been as well. And we are now going to teach you how to deconstruct and debunk those wrong beliefs, those false beliefs. And when you do and you release them, boom, there's your superpower, and we focus a lot on mindfulness. So Rini, first walk us through maybe power and the acronym, and then let's talk about mindfulness and listening to our inner voice.
Yeah. So, one of the things we don't want to do and that we tried very intentionally not to do in the book was just to be a cheerleader to our kids saying, you're great. You have strengths. You came into this world with powers. I mean, we do say that, but then we say, let us show you those powers. So power is an acronym. The P stands for presence. It's so funny. The other day I was reading an article on mindfulness and how ubiquitous it is. They practice mindfulness in the NFL, they practice it at Google, they practice it in nursery schools, they practice it, it's everywhere, right? They have something on the plane where you can practice mindfulness. But here's the thing, we spend probably billions and trillions of dollars now taking classes to be more mindful, be more deliberate about being in the present moment, intentional, and to be able to sit with the present moment. But kids do this naturally. And for anyone listening that has young children, you know that it is very difficult to, for example, get your kids ready in the morning because they're so mindful, they start playing with the water or they get distracted by something, or to go for a walk, right? So P stands for presence. We come into this world with something as adults that we all are longing for, to be more present. The O stands for originality, right? Do you remember the days where you would go into your room and get dressed by yourself and you might wear the most ridiculous outfit and you thought it was awesome, right? You owned it. You owned your O, your originality. One day, going along this path of being original, you walk into school or you go somewhere and you see, hey, I look a little bit different, or someone notices that you look a little bit different. And somehow that begins to seep in. Somehow the judgment of others, or what you perceive to be the judgment of others, begins to affect that O of originality. But you come into the world original. And the W is for being whole. It's for being worthy just as you are in this moment, without changing anything, without getting a certain grade, without achieving a certain goal. You are worthy when you come into the world just as you are. You are energized, right? It's easy for us to give examples to kids in the book of how much energy they used to have. Kids come into the world as natural born philosophers. They're energizer bunnies, going all over the place, exploring, wanting to know more, asking why, right? They're energized. And then they are resilient. I have yet to meet a kid who did not want to master their skills, of the skills that they see parents have. Going to the bathroom, for example, by themselves, starting to walk on their own. And they fumble and they fumble and they fumble and they have accidents and they fumble and they continue to get up, because humans come into this world, the human spirit is resilient. So this book at its core is about really getting the buy-in of kids. Oh my goodness, yes, I was like this. I have these powers. Well, I want them back.
Yeah. So just for kids to know that they have it, and every kid has it, and they're just being blocked by culture, not by their own craziness. We do kind of put the onus on culture, because culture has done this to all of us. And so I think that's so relieving when a kid realizes, yeah, I am having crazy thoughts because culture is this off base and culture is so misaligned. It's so reassuring, right? I think it was Einstein who said, there's no pride in being sane in an insane world. Somebody famous said it, but it's so reassuring. You're like, yeah, I feel insane, but now you realize that the world may be insane. And to allow kids to feel empowered, our teenagers know that this is not the way we need to live. We're destroying our earth. We're all in our phones. What's wrong with this picture? And this book calls it out and puts the power back in the kids. Let's talk about the inner voice. I love how we've really spent many pages helping kids authentically reconnect with their inner voice. I mean, I barely know adults who are connected to their inner voice. So this is such a key thing for our kids to learn. So talk to us about, why is it so important and how can we help cultivate that?
I mean, your inner voice allows you to show up in the world as who you are, as your authentic self, and to do that confidently. There are so many times in a child and an adult's life where you go against the grain, where maybe all your friends want to drink, but you don't want to. Maybe everybody is on technology, but you think that that's not the right thing to do. Where, I'm giving examples of where you are feeling peer pressure and there's a strain on your voice where all of a sudden it starts to get drowned out. Or oftentimes, Dr. Shefali, in your work, you talk about the voice of a parent, that is encroaching upon one's inner voice. So your inner voice is really, what it sounds like. It's that intuition inside of you. It's that it's the ability for you to hear yourself, what you care about, what you value, and to know yourself, what your strengths are and who you are, and to actually show up in the world as that person. It is literally the biggest difference between belonging, and we all crave to belong. Who doesn't crave to belong? And fitting in. We want to teach kids to access their inner voice so they can go into a group and feel like they can show up as who they are, but still feel accepted. And that is true belonging. So yeah, so we talk about the inner voice. I think we devote almost a chapter to inner voice in this book, and then what happens to it and how you tune back into it.
I've never read a book that is so into mindfulness, presence, the inner voice, the authentic self. I mean, we prize authenticity more than goodness, and it's like the top thing that we're trying to cultivate in our children and in adults. So this is a testimony to that. This is an homage to each one of us having this empowered self that's been buried by culture and fear, and we all need to resurrect it. This is a reminder to the parent reading this that, hey, you didn't have this either. And you need to resurrect it if you want your kids to have this. So it's written for every parent's inner child as well. It's really a magnificent book. We're so proud of it. Renee is a master. She's the one who took the lead on this. It's just amazing. So get this book, spread it. We're trying to make this a movement. We want to raise the next generation of healthy children, but we need everyone's help. So spread it on your social media. The website, Renee, give them the website. I'm gonna type it in.
Yeah, the website is Get Superpowered. I know all of you have a copy already, but if you want to tell a friend about it, the thing about this book is that we worked with Penguin Random House and we love our publisher, and we went to them and we said, listen, this is going to be a book, right? But we need kids to be able to write in the book. And they were like, it's not a workbook, We said, no, it's not a workbook. But if you really want to learn something, have you ever been in a classroom? They make you write to practice. We want kids to engage with the material. And so there are a lot of sections in the book where you can write in. And so I know that you guys already have a copy, but if you want to get another copy for someone at home, because everybody needs their own copy of Superpowered. And so, yes, so thank you so much for giving us this platform to be able to come here and to speak with you today, to talk to you about the book, a little bit about the premise of the book. And we would be very honored and excited to take some questions if if there are questions about the book.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was such a passionate and clear conversation. And I know that there are parents that are really going to benefit from this book and all the tools that are available in it. So let's look at the question. And there's plenty of time for people to ask questions now. Just go down to the Q&A button and go ahead and add your question there. And you can even vote on it if you want that particular question answered. So I'm going to start with Katie G. She says, hi, you outline many tools for reducing anxiety in the book, but if you were just starting on this journey with your child, which one would you start with?
I would start with creating a character and personifying worry. It's a tried and true therapeutic technique, but it's also one that can be really engaging for kids of any age. So if your child is younger, let's say 4 to 8, let's say, then you can try a traditional character. So you can either use a character that we created in the book, or you can even get a stuffed animal. The point is that you start to develop dialogue. One of the most powerful ways for us to get out of our own way when we're worrying is not to think positively, but to think accurately. And to be able to dispute our own inaccurate thoughts is so incredibly important. And kids love to do this. Now, if kids are a little bit older, let's say they're more like tween and teenage, then you get them to name their own character. It can be someone from, I've heard kids name their character Mr. Bossy. It can be sometimes it's Bossy Pants or Mr. Bossy, or sometimes it's something edgier than that, right, that they've come up with, or sometimes it's some alter ego name that they have. But in any case, kids get into it. Once they have a name of this character that they're comfortable with, they're more comfortable talking to it. See, like a teen is not going to want you know, kind of like a babyish name. But if they own, like, yeah, this is this is this worried guy that basically lives inside my head that I'm chatting to, and I've seen it work with all ages. So that's definitely a place to start.
Fantastic. Dr. Shefali, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think that it's so important to allow kids to see that they're not alone with this character, and everyone can make fun, oh, mom's, cranky, whatever is out, cranky porcupine is out, and give characters to everybody. So the kid gets to see that everybody has inner, a whole tribunal of inner characters that come out to play, and they'll be like, oh, mom, you were just really cranky today, and well, what happened, like we can give a feeling that it's not all of the person, it's just a part of the person that comes out, and we all have these inner characters that we can have a humorous relationship with.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we have another question from Katie G. She says, in another direction, how do you reconcile kids finding their power that you talk about when things like social media and public school systems work against them?
Yeah. Talk about it. It's appalling, and we are part of this, and now we have to desensitize them with, against this arson that occurs. It's literally a war out there, and we have to know what it is. And if you're a parent with young kids, don't get them involved with social media. I have a 17-year-old, so I made a lot of mistakes because I didn't know how dangerous it would turn out to be. So if you have young kids, do not hand your kids any social media till way later. I mean, as long as you can hold out. So you have to combat this now with increased connection, increased family time. You have to make an effort to really create that boundary, no screens in the bedroom, no screens after 7, and you can do this quite well till your kid is 14 or 15. After that, you may have to succumb, but at least give them that childhood that is being increasingly abducted from our children.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good question, and I don't think it's a question just of this time. I think that has happened across time where your family has a certain set of values, and then you're putting your kids in a bigger system, let's say school, that is sending mixed messages. For example, if you're telling your kids you're unique and you're amazing and you're one of a kind, and never compare yourself to anyone else, and then you send them to school where school is set up in systems of comparison. So you're compared on grades, you're compared on who's best. And I'm not saying that all of these systems are flawed, but it's a different it could be a different value set. So then they come home and they're like, wait a second, I was ranked 88th out of 90 in the class. You told me not to compare myself, but they're comparing me all day long at school. And so it's very, very important, as Dr. Shefali said, to really talk about it, to talk about the value sets, to talk about the systems without denigrating everything that's outside of your own system, but to show kids, like, yes, this is really important to us. And maybe these are the 4 or 5 values that are so core to this family. But then when we go outside of this family, you're going to see different things going on. But we come back to what we value.
Yeah, so manageable when you put it that way. So when we were talking earlier before we came on, you were saying how both of you are so busy now because of everything that COVID has brought up. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like how much are you seeing more anxiety in kids, and what kind of recommendations can you give to parents during this really troubling time?
Yeah, Renee has young kids, so she can talk about that. But I have a teenager, and I definitely, not so much now, but when it first hit, saw a huge shift in personality, and realized that many parents are experiencing this. Teenagers got isolated, they got withdrawn, maybe they got extra rebellious. It was a big transition for many kids, and Renee will talk about even the younger kids. I mean, how hard that is. But we saw that kids were disguising their anxiety, so parents didn't really understand what it was. Parents were in shock and eating too much or drinking too much and not knowing it's anxiety. And when you can say, wow, I'm feeling like vegging out in front of the the Netflix all night, now I know it's anxiety. On eating too much, now I know it's anxiety. So just understanding that inner correlation is so relieving, because now you can do something about it. Others, you just go on this spiraling out of control behavior. You know, many parents were losing their temper with their kids because they thought their kids were being difficult on purpose, not realizing the kids were in their own culture shock, experiencing PTSD in a way, and going through a real discombobulated experience. So again, books like this are so important because they name the experience and they allow it to be contextualized and give a process for recovery. So Renee, what about you? What did you experience with young kids?
Oh my goodness. I experience with my own kids, you know, again, 6 and 7, the sense of this loss of safety, right? That even though my husband and I tried as best as we could to bubble wrap and insulate them from everything that was going on outside in the outside world, they're at the age where they could see and they can sense. They are sensory beings, right? They could sense, oh my goodness, everyone's wearing masks now. I'm not allowed to touch anything. I've been asked to Purell my hands all day long, right? I've been pulled from school. My kids were in a traditional school. I've been pulled from school. And so they lost their sense of safety. For my daughter, and I've seen this with a lot of people that come, you know, to my practice, is separation anxiety. She did not, and she never had separation anxiety. She did not want to be outside of my line of sight, or her line of sight I couldn't be outside of. She needed to be in every room I was in, you know, and this was separation anxiety brought on, a regression brought on by the pandemic. And then the other thing that was happening is, you know, for example, last year my son was 5 in kindergarten, and I hope his kindergarten teacher is not here. She wasn't the most engaging teacher in person. She was definitely not engaging on Zoom. So we are asking our kids to do something that is pretty much developmentally inappropriate for them to sit in front of a screen. They can't read facial expressions, you know, even if they're in school and they're wearing masks, they can't read facial expressions. Oftentimes their kids, 20, 30, 40 kids in a classroom, they're put on mute, and they're expected to sit in front of the screen and be able to engage with it. Now, as Dr. Shefali mentioned, we don't have full executive functioning skills until we're 25-ish or so. And so the ability to motivate ourselves, to prioritize, to do all of those things that we do as adults, it's not appropriate for a kid. Now, add on top of that, you have mom and dad at home, oftentimes both of them working, and it's just a recipe for complete chaos. So I think, you know, what we have been doing is really providing support for people who feel like this is never ending chaos, right? And Dr. Shefali speaks beautifully to our tendency to want to go to that future where everything is back to normal. So I'm going to pass the baton back to you, Shefali, if you want to speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so parents are always trying to live in the future and trying to live in their children's future. And COVID really canceled this whole idea of future. And I love that personally because I'm a teacher that teaches mindfulness. And I've always said there's no future, there's no future, there's no future, but no one understands it because it's too abstract. But COVID has shown, oh, you were planning to go to Belize in the summer, weren't you? And you were planning to drop your kid off to college, weren't you? And go for a long honeymoon. Well, there's no future. And this is the truth. Every wisdom teacher, every meditation teacher dins it into people's heads, but no one wants to understand it. And then when you're hit with a crisis, you're like, how dare my future be taken away? You know, there's this outrageous entitlement. But this is how life is. And if parents can now really take that in and realize that they've been living in their children's future and making children catapult from their natural state of living in the present to the future so unhealthy, now it's time to realign. Now it's time to take the lessons that COVID is teaching us and say, you know what? All those extra things that I was doing were non-essential, and it's time to get back to the essential. And what a wonderful opportunity to connect to the self, connect to your kids. And connection doesn't mean being on top of them and hugging them all day. It just means taking out all the noise, you know, and sitting in the comfort of your own belonging, like this book talks about, and taking out all the extra garbage, you know. And we parents have done this to our children. Our children weren't born nervous wrecks, caring about how they look and their cheekbones and their butts. You know, we, meaning culture, adult culture, has injected our children with anxiety. So COVID, if anything, while traumatic for sure, has also allowed for an opportunity to rebirth a new vision for how we want to live with our children, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the viewer just asked, you know, how do you think this experience with COVID will shape our kids in the future? And I think you've touched on
And
that.
we don't know how it will. Again, there's no future. It's
Mm,
really about understanding that all that extra noise was really not necessary. We didn't need
mm,
to be going for travel baseball and 10,000 activities and learning how to do things by the age of 2. We now see that life is lived in the present moment. It can be lived quite simply. You know, we've all been spending less, and that's a good thing. We can do without all the things that we thought we could never do without. And we have learned to release our pressure on the earth, which is a good thing. You know, the earth has seen less humans tread it. This is a good thing. So it was time for a mass reorganization. So yes, it comes through tragedy and trauma, because that's how we humans are. We don't seem to learn through preemptive foretelling. We only learn posthumously. So here we are again. But I think it's been an amazing opportunity to get back to basics and realize the value of teachers, value of health, value of simplicity.
yes. Renee, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, you know, when I think about what is going to happen with our kids in the future, I always like to think about what is in our control, right? And I also like to think about others who have been through traumatic events in the past and what has been the difference between someone who has gone through 9/11, let's say. So, for example, my husband was actually in the Twin Towers, on 9/11, and there were thousands of people there, and there were big swaths of people who came out of that who were traumatized, who experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, who ended up going to therapy, some of them for years. And there were other groups of people who experienced growth. And so really for us, and I'm not really answering the question, I'm going to leave it open-ended, but is to do an investigation into what are the elements that differ between the people, is it just, and we talk a little bit about this in the book, is it genetics, right? Is it genes that just make you resilient, those people that bounce back and that actually grew? Is it something else? Is it something that they could do? And
Mm,
so we posit in the book that there is a lot that you can do. A lot of times, the way that you interpret the university that you go through, your mindset has a lot to do with whether you're going to experience growth post-trauma or you're going to experience heavy stress or toxic stress post-trauma. So I think that there are things that are in our control. And that kids should know are in their control so that we're not victims, right?
mm,
What
yeah,
is a victim? A victim has no power. Oh, just victims to COVID. Our kids are just victims to COVID. I think we need to think about what's in our control, and how can we facilitate growth.
yeah. One of the things that I took away from the book myself as an adult is this like, idea of reframing. So you can say, I'm nervous, which is kind of puts this worry spin on it, but then you can reframe it to say, but no, I'm excited. And so for me, I thought that's a perfect example of how you can reframe something that gives you stress and worry to rephrase it in a way that propels you forward in an exciting way.
I think the real interesting thing about the reframing is that it's not just something that happens because people get caught up and they're like, oh, that's just positive thinking. It's not just something that you're reinterpreting in your mind. It has a physiological effect. So when they do studies on people that say, I am excited before they're giving a speech, what that does is that the stress in your body reacts in a different way. So you actually are more motivated, you perform better, right? You're more productive, you're more creative. So it's kind of amazing that the way that you think about something, the way that you think about a challenge, that construct can physiologically affect the way the stress is reacting in your body.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I thought this was an amazing book. I just got so much out of it. So thank you both so much for this. Before we, wrap things up, because we have just a few more minutes, a question that we've been asking all of our authors, and I don't know if you all have had time to do this because it sounds like you've been very, very busy, but what have you been reading since September started? Have you had any chance to read anything, or are you
It's
just
so
really
funny.
digging deep?
I just ordered 2 books that I've literally not read, because I've been working on another book, and it's my policy that when I work on any book, not to read anyone else's books, because I don't want to be infused with other ideas and get off my course. So, and I've been working on that book for 2 years. Vinny and I've been working on this book for 3 years. Vinny, because she'll talk about it, but I literally, for the first, and I intentionally ordered 2 books. I ordered Cast and the other book by Isabel Wilkerson. And I said, it's time for me to read. My brain is not reading. But now I feel I'm in the safe zone that I can read. I finished the draft of that book. So now I'm allowing myself to read. But literally for 3 years, I don't think, besides articles and podcasts and stuff, blogs, I don't think I picked up a book because I was so afraid of enmeshing with other books. But go ahead, Rini, what about you?
I don't know if this is going to hurt my credibility as like an adult, actually. But I'm currently reading Dog Man with my son. So I read, and I'm reading Guts with my daughter.
Nice.
So I've been reading a lot of graphic novels, and Guts is amazing, by the way, by Raina Telgemeier. I've been reading a lot of kids' books because I read, books to my kids to go to sleep. But I end up reading them without them, which is funny because I think some of it is a fascination of how people tell stories visually. And others, honestly, I just get entertained by it. I'm not going to lie.
We are a big fan of graphic novels in our house, so
all right,
really empathize with that. Well, thank you both so much. This was really fantastic. Unfortunately, it's all the time we have to talk tonight, but I do want to give many thanks to Rini and Dr. Shefali. Thank you for being here and for joining us, and thank you to the viewers for tuning in and for asking questions. Don't forget, you can still click on the link. You can follow our Children and Teens Department on social media. The handle is posted in the chat as well. And you can also watch past events. You'll be able to watch this one again in a couple of days too. And thanks again, everyone. Keep reading widely and expanding your world, and please stay safe. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.